It was just 6 months ago, after years of protests, then a state of emergency, that East Africa's most populous country, Ethiopia, saw an unexpected changing of the political guard. The surprise resignation of Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn led to a leader from the Oromo tribe, Abiyyi Ahmed, taking power. In the 4 months since he became Prime Minister, he has not only forged an historic agreement to end the 20-year standoff with Eritrea, he's also made bold promises to end the authoritarianism of former prime ministers and to heal social tensions among Ethiopia's Oromo, Amhara, and Tigray ethnic groups. The media, specifically social media, are central to this story because it was Ethiopians' constant use of platforms like Facebook and Twitter to coordinate protests and amplify grievances beyond the reach of government censorship that preceded all the changes. The Listening Post's Flo Phillips now on how social media, both inside and outside the country, shaped Ethiopia's political revolution and what some of the most influential Ethiopian journalists are now hoping for under their new prime minister.
On April 2nd, a new prime minister, an Oromo, addressed Ethiopians as one nation.
ሁላችንም መገንዘብ ያለብን የዲሞክራሲ ስርዓት ግንባታ መደማመጥን ይጠይቃል።
There was hope, there was optimism.
You could take it as a sort of Obama's moment for Ethiopians.
የሰብአዊና ዲሞክራሲያዊ መብቶች በተለይም ሐሳብን የመግለጽ የመሰባሰብና የመደራጀት መብቶች በሕገ መንግስታችን መሰረት ሊከበሩ ይገባል።
Whether allowing freedom of the press or to open up the space for the opposition or even to restore peace with Eritrea.
እውቀታችሁንና ልምዳችሁን ይዛችሁ ወደ ሀገራችሁ መመለስና ሀገራችሁን አልምታችሁ መልማት ለምትሹ ሁሉ እጃችንን ዘርግተን እንቀበላችኋለን።
And I was very much impressed by his articulation, his vision, and how he would like to change things quite in a different way than we used to know.
ህዝቡ አገልጋዩን የመተቸት የመምረጥ የመጠየቅ ሙሉ መብት አለው። መንግስት የህዝብ አገልጋይ ነው።
Prior to Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's rise to power, Ethiopia had had just 2 prime ministers in 23 years. Meles Zenawi, who spent his 17 years consolidating power around his ethnic group, the Tigrayans, and Haile Mariam Desalegn, whose leadership only preserved the status quo, ignoring widespread calls for reforms. During that period, Ethiopia's democracy was stained with sham elections and clampdowns on media criticism. Draconian legislation such as the 2004 Criminal Code and the 2009 Anti-Terror Proclamation was repeatedly abused, landing thousands of journalists and political activists in prison and sending countless others into exile.
I've been in prison 9 times, for over 9 years. And for what? For simply writing my views, nothing more. This final time I was in prison for 6.5 years, I was charged as a terrorist. But of course, I've never been a terrorist. This is what you get for working as a journalist in tyrannies and dictatorships.
Critical media was being decimated one way or another, and journalists were leaving the country. We saw that kind of yawning gap in the media. And of course, the 2009 media law in itself put a lot of restrictions on media registration and access to funding to the media and all these things that really systematically eliminated independent media off the ground.
Despite the Ethiopian authorities' tight control of the mainstream media and the internet, social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter broke the government's hold on information. Increased access to smartphones and improvements in internet connectivity led tech-savvy Ethiopians to use social media to talk politics. By 2015, massive demonstrations against government land grabbing in the Oromia region had broken out. Social media proved crucial for the coordination of protests and the airing of grievances. Jawar Mohammed, an activist and journalist from Oromia, became a key player from his base in the United States, beyond the reach of the Ethiopian authorities. 4 years ago, he turned his living room in Minnesota into a kind of newsroom, posting and tweeting eyewitness accounts of government abuse for his millions of followers back home, sharing protest tactics and strategies, and using his platforms to help Ethiopians connect.
You cannot imagine this revolution, this change, without social media. People from all corners of the world will snap a picture, record a video, and send it to us through WhatsApp or through Facebook. And we take that, we verify it, we edit it, and we add it back to them. And they take our production and they share it.
Jawar Mohammed was the one central figure that played a very decisive role in galvanizing the protest. He has become a virtual space for the gathering of the message of the protesters who have been silenced, who have been killed, who could not trust the media to tell their stories. They trust Jawar. They send their stories to him, and he broadcasts it back. And you can disagree with him. I have a lot of things that I disagree with him, but you can't deny him that significant role he played in this protest.
He was involved in mobilizing people, to come out and ask and demand their freedom. And when there's absence of democracy, journalists are forced to double as activists for democracy. And that's what Jawar Mohammed has done. He wasn't fighting for a specific political line. He was advocating for fundamental democratic rights. Because unless there's fundamental democratic rights, there's no journalism.
The kind of fast change that we've seen over the last 3 years without the social media would have been impossible. And the mainstream media in this, it hurts my ego to admit that we were back burners in this whole process. We were latecomers into it. It has taken us too long to understand this shift and the ability to use the social media to effect the kind of change that the political activists have done quite successfully.
Ethiopian journalists working in the diaspora, like Jawar Mohammed, have spent the last few years supporting movements for political change from afar. Now, with a new Prime Minister, it's time to assess whether Abiy Ahmed will follow through on his promise to open up the space for free expression, and for them to work out their own journalistic role in this new Ethiopia. Ahmed Shide is the Minister for Communication Affairs. We asked him about the government's plans to review the restrictive media legislation still in place.
We have already set up a legal professionals council to review different laws that prohibits or that limits citizens' exercise of their political right, whether it is in the media context or in the political party context. And definitely it's going to be addressed. This is part of the deepening of democratization and of reforms that has been articulated and managed and led by the Prime Minister.
And Ethiopians are already seeing the results. Since the beginning of this year, more than 6,000 political prisoners, many of them journalists like Iskender Nega, have been released. And on June 22nd, Abiyyi's chief of staff tweeted that 264 websites and TV channels, including critical media outlets like Jawar Mohammed's Oromia Media Network, had been unblocked. There are still significant roadblocks to a genuinely free press, including repressive laws that remain on the books. But the government's call for journalists to help restructure Ethiopia's media landscape is being taken up. Some of them are coming home.
The kind of freedom that we see in Ethiopia today is unprecedented, but everybody has this doubt in their mind. Is this a dream? Is it going to last? Is this guy going to go into another dictator? We'll be traveling back to the country to build the media. We have now established our headquarters, our office in Addis Ababa. We're going to continue to support him, but we're going to hold his feet to the fire as well, because there are a lot of promises he must keep.
If Dr. Abiyyi does not deliver the promise of democracy, then we'll be back to social media. we'll go back to advocating for democracy, for transparency, for equality, and we'll end up clashing with the government. If so, I'm prepared to go back to prison again. So whether there's democracy or no democracy, it's back to work. There's no choice.